So when I was 3 years old, my mother says, "Oh, I see a nice toy in the Army surplus store. It's a great big bottle of mercury. I think I'll give that to Patrick so he can play with it." And so she brings a bottle of mercury home, and I'm a normal babbling 2-year-old, you know, precocious and all this stuff. And she gives me a bottle of mercury to play with. Wow, what a toy. So I start rubbing it on copper to make mirrors, you know, and I start rubbing it on pennies to make little shiny, they look like dimes, you know, and I'm drinking the mercury, and I'm rubbing it all over my body, thinking I'm going to shine like a mirror. And so suddenly I became autistic, and so I never said another word till I was 5.5 years old. And my brother says it's just because I didn't have anything to say, and I wish it was just that. 5.5 years old, and I start speaking, but then I'm stuttering like crazy. I'm stuttering and stuttering and stuttering. My mother was trying to teach me how to not stutter, and she reads in a book, well, you put pebbles in their mouth, and they won't stutter if you put pebbles in their mouth. Well, that didn't work. And so, anyway, all my thoughts were coming so fast I couldn't handle them, you know, and they couldn't come out of my mouth. And so my mother said, well, Patrick, I'll tell you what, why don't you kind of think about what you want to say over and over again, and try to formulate the words and just say those words. And so I start working on that, and I learned how to talk that way. And not stutter, except that my speech sometimes is halting. So when I'm at 8 years old, by the time I was 14, I could read 14,500 words a minute with 95% comprehension. So I read thousands and thousands of books. And we call me an encyclopedic synthesis because I can take all that information and synthesize it and find connections between things. And so I can take all this data. And so here I am, 8 years old, and they allow me to go through the libraries. And so in Bismarck, North Dakota, I read every book in the library, every single book in the library. And I went to the librarian and I said, "Do you have anything else for me to read?" And she said, "Yeah, well, we got a basement, and we got all these books that are down there to be burned because no one checks them out anymore." So I go through the basement and I read every book in the basement. When I was 8 years old, I invented and built a Tesla coil using a ham radio transmitter operating at 14 megacycles. This operates at low frequency relatively. And so when I was 11 years old, I built a guided missile atomic bomb detector and was going to do it in a science fair. And so I won the whole science fair. And so it got in the newspaper, and that was like on a weekend. And on Monday, I'm sitting in study hall, and the principal comes on and says, "Will Patrick Flanagan come to my office immediately? The Pentagon is on the telephone." So, you know, I went down to the principal's office, and a 5-star general from the Pentagon was on the phone. And he said, "Son, we want to know how you know about all our secret testing on atomic bombs and missiles." So I said, "Well, I cannot tell a lie. I did it with my little missile detector." And so they sent a group of scientists, 15 of them from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, down to Houston and they took my little guided missile detector away. And they made my father sign a piece of paper that said that if I talked to anybody about my invention, that it was an act of treason and that I could be shot or hung, you know, shot by a firing squad, and my father would be shot by, you know, and so forth. And so, so I learned that was my first interaction with the government. Okay, and so then I invented a neurophone, this device that transmits sound directly into the brain by ultrasonic waves. And I invented that when I was 13 and applied for a patent on it. And by then they were kind of watching me. And it turns out that the neurophone was at least 40 years ahead of its time. The fax machine was invented in 1912. So it took a long time for people to start using fax machines. So we moved forward 40 years in time, and the scientist at the University of Virginia duplicates my neurophone and discovers that human beings have in their heads a hearing organ that's actually an organ of balance. It's called saccule. And the saccule is the size of the tip of your little finger, and it's got what's called brain sand in it, calcium carbonate crystals. And when you tilt your head, it stimulates nerve receptors in the saccule, tells you where your head is in relation to gravity. And so it turns out that this scientist at the University of Virginia discovered that dolphins and whales use their saccules to detect ultrasonic sound. And they transmit, and their saccules are hearing organs for ultrasonic sound. So he discovered that almost 100% of profoundly deaf people can hear with the neurophone device, because our hearing organs are vestigial hearing organs that we don't use because it requires sound transmitted ultrasonically, physically through the human body. And so how would our ancestors receive ultrasonic sound transmitted physically through their bodies? There's only one way. It's only if they were swimming with dolphins and whales.